I can't tell you how many companies we've talked to that, so-and-so told me I had Nexus, and I established a Nexus back in 2018, so I went ahead and registered in 2018 or 2020, 3, 4, 5, 7 years ago, whatever it may be. Ouch. They didn't tell me that I had to file these returns, I had to pay all this tax. They didn't tell me I had to pay the penalty and the interest. I just did it because they said that's what I should do. And I'm from our point of view, and a very common core value that we have internally as well as externally with our clients is collaboration builds confidence. There's no greater peace of mind you can get than by collaborating with somebody who has experience and expertise in this world in which you live, and now have this responsibility.
Hello, you are listening to the Saltcast by Peisner Johnson, the sales tax people. And for the last 30 plus years, we have been providing sales tax solutions and peace of mind to everyone we talk to. Hey, good morning, guys. Jason, Paul, glad you guys could be on with me today. I think we got a great discussion going on today, but first I just want to know what you guys been up to. What's the new year going to turn out like for you guys? What you guys are excited about? How you guys doing?
Well, first of all, Happy New Year, Ryan. Thanks again for bringing us together to talk about state and local tax, but especially sales tax. When it comes to Peisner Johnson and what we're about, we're really leaning into our service mark, which is the sales tax people. I'm sure everyone out there has seen a lot of different advertising on our website. We really have focused our attention on sales tax. And one of the reasons that everybody knows about in the last 5 years is Wayfair. So 2024 is another year of bringing peace of mind to companies when it comes to sales tax.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's been what? Since 2018, so now we're looking at almost 6 years since the Wayfair decision. And I had a conversation.
Everybody's got to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's been 6 years. Everybody understands it, and everybody's compliant.
Yeah. But I had a conversation with a guy yesterday, and he helps consult CPAs, lawyers, some other people on how to grow their business. And he also was reaching out to me because he thinks they'd be great on our podcast. And I agree. I think some would be great. But he was like, well, what about sales tax, though? It's like, how complicated is sales tax? I'm like, well, let me just give you kind of a surface. It's like, even like we're doing a podcast tomorrow about, sales tax nexus and how to determine that, because, a few years ago it was just physical nexus you had to worry about. But now there's economic nexus. So there's a lot of new terms, and you never quite know what. I think everybody has different terms for different things, especially with all the new softwares and the services they provide, and they use all this lingo and jargon that you might not understand. So really my question is, guys, at the start of once you recognize, you know what, I think I should start looking at sales tax and what it means for me and my business. Where do I start? How do I get started and get going in the right direction to make sure I'm doing everything correctly?
That's a great question. And to segue right into it, let me just tell you who should be thinking about that. If you're a company anywhere in the world doing business in the United States, you need to be thinking about this. You need to be working towards identifying if you have a sales tax responsibility for collection and remittance on your sales across all the states in the U.S. So number one, anybody doing business in the U.S., even if you've been doing business in the U.S. for decades or centuries, you definitely need to be trying to understand what your responsibility might be when it comes to sales tax. So that's number one. Number two, to your point, there's a lot of different terminology, and it can be confusing, right? You hear the terms of physical nexus, economic nexus. You hear terms like nexus studies, to understand what your footprint might be. Sometimes you hear people saying, hey, you need to have an exposure analysis. And sometimes people are like, wait. If I have exposure, I don't even want to know about it. So I don't even
I
like
don't like to
the
be exposed.
term of that. Some people indicate, hey, you probably have some liabilities. Like, wait a minute, liabilities? I'm just selling goods across the U.S. People are responsible for how they handle sales tax. Well, things have changed. So, and another term you might hear about is a risk analysis. I like the term risk analysis, and that's the term we use because it does a couple of things. It definitely determines what your Nexus footprint might be, which again, we could have 2-hour webinars on just Nexus alone. But it also helps you understand the taxability of your goods and services across the US, which you need to know because if you have Nexus or a responsibility to collect remit tax, you also need to know on what. So you need to know the taxability. Now, most of the time, a Nexus study or a risk analysis is really just to identify where do I need to get registered because I've passed these thresholds and now I'm going to be required by the state to engage when it comes to sales and use tax. But a risk analysis also identifies potential risk from historical activities in a particular state. So sometimes people come to us and they say, yeah, I've had a Nexus study, I'm good. Okay, well, that's great. That's great. But who did it, how it was performed, and what parameters it looked at are really important. Paul is really the expert in this regard, but when we're talking Nexus study specifically, what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's important to understand, to your very point, who did it and what the parameters involved were, because you could be identifying, hey, I established economic nexus back in 2018 when they established the new legislation, and so I'm going to go ahead and register effective 2018. Whew, I mean, that's a big bear. That's a big elephant, you got to swallow. And so before you register, you got to understand, in my opinion, you got to understand what kind of exposure is out there. What is the liability? Yes, I had the responsibility to collect the tax back in 2018 when the legislation was passed, or 2020 when my economic business really took off. My e-commerce sales just skyrocketed, and I crossed the threshold. But from that point, what kind of responsibility? I have this responsibility, but what kind of liability do I have as of that point, or as of today, when I realized that? And so understanding, my responsibility, but then also calculating from the risk analysis, calculating what that liability looks like and what the exposure looks like is monumental. I can't tell you how many companies we've talked to that, so-and-so told me I had Nexus and I established a Nexus back in 2018, so I went ahead and registered in 2018 or 2020, 3, 4, 5, 7 years ago, whatever it may be. Ouch. They didn't tell me that I had to file all these returns. I had to pay all this tax. They didn't tell me how to pay the penalty and the interest. I just did it because they said that's what I should do. And I'm from our point of view, and a very common core value that we have internally as well as externally with our clients is collaboration builds confidence. There's no greater peace of mind you can get than by collaborating with somebody who has experience and expertise in this world in which you live, and now have this responsibility. Now, businesses aren't in the world today to deal with sales tax. I mean, they're trying to sell a product, a service, make revenue, make some margins, increase profit, so on and so forth. Taxes, the last thing they want to deal with, and it's frustrating. It's a pain.
Yeah. When it comes to Nexus, I mean, there's a couple of things that matter, right? Was it DIY? Did you determine on your own that you have economic nexus? And so knee-jerk reaction might be go get registered. Well, you might go get registered and not realize that you had some risk in that state for various other reasons. Maybe you had an automated solution just spit out a report, and based on that report, you don't really have the ability to collaborate with anybody or understand it fully, and so maybe you take some actions that could actually work against you or could bring some risk or harm. The other concept is we run into people all the time who are focused on economic nexus and they're worried about the thresholds, some states for the sales volume, some states for, or both, the transaction volume, although a lot of those are going away.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just focused on the last calendar year, but you're dealing with some states that are looking at the last rolling 12 months, or you're looking at states that may not include marketplace facilitator sales,
Right.
meaning your gross sales in that state mean you're over the threshold, but your sales on your own website are not sufficient to really create Nexus. And so you want to
Yeah,
be able to collaborate on that. But
for sure.
so maybe you're just thinking about economic Nexus alone, but sometimes we have clients that come to us and their focus is so much on economic nexus that they've looked past the idea that they've got employees in a state,
Right.
or they
Right.
drive their own vehicles into a state, or they've got
Right.
inventory in a state, or they've got third-party contractors in a state that might be
Right.
exposing them to nexus laws based on a physical nexus. And so, yeah, it matters who does it, it
Yep.
matters how it's done, and it matters what is taken into regard as you participate in this Nexus study.
Right.
But Nexus is just step one, right? We've
Yeah.
said from the beginning since, I don't know now, 2015, 2016, when Andy wrote the book, Start with Nexus. You absolutely always start with Nexus, but even a
Yeah.
Nexus study, um, how it's done, who does it, and what parameters are brought in are significant for you to understand whether you actually have a responsibility in a given state or not.
Yeah.
But now, once you've done that, our approach is we take in all of those parameters, right?
Right.
Our approach to a nexus study is we're looking at physical nexus,
Yep.
economic nexus. We're looking at sales volume based on the way the state looks at sales volume. Could
Yep.
be taxable sales only, could be
Right.
non-marketplace sales only, could be rolling 12 months, could be a calendar year that you're looking back at to
Yeah.
determine nexus and when that nexus was actually established based on activity. So we're
Right.
looking at that across the board, and that's great. Our Nexus study gives you a lot of information, and then our approach is to collaborate with you afterwards to help you understand where you have a responsibility to be
Yep.
registered, to be collecting tax. But it doesn't stop there, and it's why we don't call it just a Nexus study. We call it a risk analysis because we also are going to look at the taxability of the products and services that you sell.
Right.
So just tell us a little bit about how taxability affects a risk analysis. Because, right, Paul, you could have Nexus in every single state, but
Yep.
you're legitimately selling something that's not taxable in any state.
Yeah.
Now your risk and your responsibility have gone down to zero.
Drastically. Yeah, I was going to mention that because obviously Nexus is that triggering point, right? It's when the state can impose upon you as a business to collect sales tax on sales made to customers in their state. But if what you're selling or how you sell it in the
Hmm.
state, that will have an impact, right? If I sell it through Amazon and Amazon's a marketplace facilitator, they're required to collect the tax on my behalf. So my responsibility, because I've established Nexus, is there, but my liability or my exposure is nil because Amazon's collecting it and remitting it on my behalf. So taxability plays a big, big factor. Or I could be offering a service or selling a non-taxable or an exempt good, or just simply selling for resale to other wholesalers or distributors in the state. So what you sell has a big impact because yes, I may have Nexus, but are my products and services taxable in this state or all these states? Or do I have exempt customers in this state? You know, maybe I just sell to the government and the government has an exemption that the state honors. And so now I don't have a tax liability or exposure or responsibility. I have the responsibility, but my liability is nil. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And believe it or not Ripley's believe it or not, but Peisner, believe it or not, we have companies that come to us and they're like, hey, we had this Nexus study done by this other entity. Could have been another provider, could have been an automated solution, could have been a DIY situation. And they determined that we had Nexus in whatever states, and that we had taxable goods that we should have collected tax on
Right,
historically, right? We
right,
created Nexus way back. Our goods are taxable. And so they encourage us to, one of the remedies is to move in the direction of doing a voluntary disclosure agreement.
right.
Well, this is what I'm talking about, believe it or not. Believe it or not, we have companies that come to us in this very situation and they're already involved in the voluntary disclosure process. And we start looking at the Nexus study, we start looking at the goods that they sell, and we start looking at the taxability, and we realize, for instance, in Washington, what you sell in Washington is not taxable. Wait, what?
Right.
Yeah. Why are you doing a VDA in Washington when the goods you sell in Washington are not taxable? And that's when you have a deer in the headlights, just so much frustration in the marketplace because the time is not spent in a risk analysis to determine Nexus is important, but
Right.
determining whether your goods are actually taxable or that you have the responsibility to collect the tax in that state is critical to determining what the remedy is to
Right.
get compliant and
Yep.
and get right. So
100%.
just as a segue into that, what are some of the remedies? I think a lot of the marketplace is familiar with this, but my concern is that people get stuck
Yeah.
participating in a remedy that doesn't actually benefit them. So
Yeah.
maybe we
Yeah.
can talk about the remedies.
When you do the nexus analysis or the risk analysis to determine when and where nexus has been established, and you determine, your goods are taxable in that state, now the rubber hits the road, right? I have the
Big time.
responsibility, I have the liability. I've had this liability for, if we use the example, we've had the liability since 2020. Well, now I'm going on 4 years with this liability. So now now we just have the discussion with the client about materiality, and then what are the remedies? Well, here's when Nexus was triggered. Here's when your responsibility kicked in. You haven't been collecting the tax since that point. So what can we do? Well, if you were audited by the state would come in and impose tax since that date you established Nexus and require you to pay the tax and the penalty and interest out of your own pocket. You could try and go back to the customers that you sold these products or services to collect the tax, but for e-commerce companies, good luck with that because of the numerous amounts of customers that you sold product to. So that's what would be required under law. An alternative that companies use is registering currently, using a current start date on the registration, turning the tax on, starting to collect it and remit it going forward. Some of the states like Utah, for example, they want to know, hey, what were your sales the last 3 years in our state? And then we're going to do a little bit of a deeper audit to determine whether or not you should have registered 3 years ago. That's painful to go through that process. The other alternative is if it is material enough, then we enter into a voluntary disclosure agreement with the state. We go to the state anonymously on behalf of our client and we indicate, hey, this business has been doing business in your state, selling products and services to your state customers that are residing in your state for a number of years. We want to enter into this voluntary disclosure agreement, and the state will limit the look-back period. So if Nexus was established 7 years ago, they'll limit the look-back period to their state, maybe 3 years or 4 years, depending on the state. And they'll require you as a business to pay that tax through that VDA, through that look-back period. And then they'll waive the penalty and sometimes the interest or a portion of the interest, or you can negotiate with the state in that regard. We haven't seen many amnesties at all in the last several years.
They're always worse. I don't understand them. Well, let's just say this. When it comes to amnesties in general, anybody hears the term amnesty. Amnesty means I'm free of liability because I'm going to come clean. And I'm going to get in line and do what I need to do going forward.
Right.
So I think, my opinion, I think it's false advertising when a state says, hey, we're going to have this amnesty program for these 90 days. Just come forward.
Yeah.
Let us know that you'd like to participate. And then the effects of the amnesty are oftentimes worse than a VDA, right? It's not an amnesty for the tax at all. You still have to pay all the tax you didn't collect.
Yeah.
And maybe you get a reduced penalty.
Yeah.
Or maybe they determine they're going to look back further in the amnesty than they allow on their voluntary disclosure programs. So, yeah, if you come across amnesties, but to your point, we haven't seen very many.
Yeah, we haven't seen very many of them.
But if you come across one, please get in touch with us and let's collaborate on that. Let's just make sure that it really is the best approach to managing any type of risk or liability that you have.
And I wanted to add on to your comment earlier about the entering into a VDA when your products weren't taxable, and then the client, in this particular instance, we're currently helping a client who paid, $50,000, $60,000 in tax through the VDA that they didn't have to because their products or services weren't taxable in the state. So that's super painful. Not only are you paying the tax and the interest, but you're also paying the service fees to the service provider, the software company, whoever is doing it. You're paying all those fees. So now it's just an
Well,
absolute
and
inconvenience.
to that point, you've probably turned on tax and you're collecting it from your
Yeah.
customers as well.
Yeah. So you likely have unhappy customers because they're having to pay tax on things that aren't taxable in their state. It's just an absolute mess. I can't stress. It just draws to my attention more and more. You know, you have a kid who goes and hurts themselves in a football game, and you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Hey, man, we got to cut that leg off." Oh no, we can't cut the leg. Are you sure we can't repair it? No, we have to cut it off. Well, you're going to go get a second opinion, right? Or third opinion, or fourth opinion. Is there anything we can do to repair this leg so he doesn't have to live with just one leg? Well, yeah, we can actually heal that up. But here's how we're going to do that. Okay, I like that. Let me go find another. So it's no different, in my opinion, when it comes to sales tax. You have these providers out there who, software companies, service providers, Pizer Johnson alike, whoever it may be. Even internally, you have CFOs who have been around the block. Oh, I know so much. Here's what we're going to do. Our firm, it costs you nothing to collaborate with us to get some expertise, to get a second opinion. Let's take a look at what you did. Let's take a look at the recommendations. Here's what we would do, and here's why. And then here's how we can help you. Or go back to the service provider and have them do it. Or your CFO, he can do it. Or whoever the case may be, whatever the case may be. There's just so much value. Again, I can't stress enough the peace of mind that comes from collaborating, getting a second, third opinion on before you move forward on anything. Because
That's such a great analogy, practicing medicine and practicing sales tax consulting. It really is valuable to get a second opinion. And to your point, second opinions with Pizer Johnson cost you nothing. They cost you a little bit of time, but the likelihood is you get on a call and you get to chat with us and you gain greater confidence and peace of mind.
Yeah.
Maybe the decisions that you're making or that have been presented to you or the recommendations are just exactly what you should be doing.
Right.
But worse, they may not be what you should be doing. And so It's just great to hear from another group without any responsibility for engaging, right? That's just one of our favorite aspects of our firm from a culture standpoint. Is we are so happy to help other people gain confidence and peace of mind. Even if we're not right for you, even if there's not much we can do for you, or even if it doesn't add value to what you're trying to accomplish.
100%.
The collaboration just allows for incredible confidence in making whatever decisions you're making as you roll forward.
And it's really unfortunate because, I mean, sales tax, it's a trust tax. It's not a tax on business like an income or a franchise or whatever else may be out there, right? I mean, the sales tax is designed to be taxed, paid by the customer at the time of the transaction. Unfortunately, it's on you as a business. It's your responsibility to collect it or to ensure that it's collected at the proper rate and the proper time, and then just remit it to the state. And the fact that businesses are having to pay so much out of their own pocket is really unfortunate, in my opinion. But at the same time, it's something that you have to make certain that you're doing and you're compliant in, and you have a service provider or somebody who's watching that and monitoring that on your behalf so that you don't end up paying even more out of your own pocket.
100%. Let's chat. Let's talk salt. That's what we want to do. Let us help.
Baby. So what I'm gathering from you, Paul, is if you break your leg or your kid breaks their leg, don't come to us for a second opinion. But
no.
Well, I mean, we have opinions and we'll offer them, but we wouldn't necessarily tell you to follow them when it comes to the medical practice.
Yeah.
It just reminded me, like my dad, we would tell him, it's like, Dad, my hand really hurts. So let me look at it. Oh, got to cut it off. You just got to cut it off. No, Dad, it's not bad. It's not that bad anymore. It's okay. But super important to come in, get a second opinion. Like you said, it costs nothing. And would you guys say that, getting at this Nexus analysis is really a first step into getting sales tax compliant? I mean, obviously recognizing that sales tax might be an issue for your business, but then that first step is getting that nexus analysis done.
100%. We talk
It
to a lot
provide.
of people. Oh, sorry, Paul.
Oh, you're
We
good.
talk we we talk to a lot of people who are already savvy, right? This is why we love to collaborate,
Loads.
right? Because they've already been through a process. They've really done the work to understand what their situation is, and they do come to us looking for recommendations based on all of the work that's been done. And when we
Yeah.
can collaborate on that, we can confirm that, yeah, you've really done the due diligence to understand what your situation is, and we can proceed from there, right? We're not going to
Mm-hmm.
back you way up, but we come across a lot more individuals
Mm-hmm.
who don't understand what needs to be done or what their situation is. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this nexus analysis is the absolute key to understand your responsibility for sales tax.
I call it the Sales Tax 101 class because you got to start at the foundation, and the foundation truly is, where do I have Nexus? When did I establish Nexus? And what is exactly my responsibility from that point going forward to today? From that responsibility, you can calculate and estimate what your tax liability is to really help make an educated business decision. So it's more so education and educating clients and businesses. Okay, here's your footprint. Here's what it means. Here's how to interpret that into layman's terms. And then here's some recommended steps moving forward. Here's the pros. Here's the cons. And then putting you in the driver's seat as a business to really be able to make an educated decision. Okay, well, I can risk that, or that's not material to me. Understand that the state may audit me here. You can make all those decisions if you're properly educated and you have the materials, the resources in front of you to be able to make those decisions. So that
Okay,
crucial step number
okay,
one.
okay. I just got to say something. I want to scratch my response because Paul's response I liked way better. I just, if Ryan, if you were to ask that question again, Par would not speak. We would just let Paul respond to that.
I also want to point out that we have an awesome tool on our website. You can go to the salestaxpeople.com, click on our resources, and see that state-by-state Nexus tool, Nexus calculator, I think we call it. And you can click state by state, find out what the Nexus thresholds are, and you can put in there your own sales, and you can see whether or not you might be meeting these Nexus thresholds. And so to a degree, you have to do your own do-it-yourself approach if you find that you like doing that kind of stuff and you're pretty savvy at it. So make sure and check that out. And Jason and Paul, thank you so much for joining the conversation today and collaborating, letting me hear about your deep knowledge about Nexus and taxability and risk. But yeah, like I said, find us at thesalestaxpeople.com. You
Love it.
can chat with us, sign up for a free What's Next call, chat with us for free. And that's what we love to do. So please, we're not wasting our time. Been on a phone call with us. And there you have it. We hope to see you guys on another one.
Indeed. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks, Ryan.